Boy.
All right, we're already diving in with
we're
our next
ahead
guest.
of the interview here.
Because we love talking with this man. He just summarizes it up and gives us all the backstory,
too. We're going to talk right now about, we're going to further discuss the potential of a government shutdown at the end of the week. Local attorney Vikas Bajaj, we love having here, joins us again this morning. Vic, great to see you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your comments. I appreciate that.
Good morning.
So we've been talking about a myriad of things as we sat right here. You have 5 minutes with us. What would you like to address, do you think?
First, the State of the Union address, I think, is the most monumental aspect and the most public aspect that we've seen from the Trump administration and President Trump in the recent past. I would like to say that it was so encouraging to see everyone in there at a certain point in time chanting USA, USA, USA. And for a moment, the great divider, as we're told, President Trump, brought everybody together. And in my mind, and in our household, it was an emotional time, and it was purely magical, in my opinion. If you look at all of the things that President Trump spoke about, there really is only one issue that divides politicians and constituents on one side or the other, and that would be the border, the wall. Nobody wants a shutdown. That's the last thing people want. You can assure yourself that President Trump would not like to hurt any of the good American workers that are every day working for their cups of coffee and their dinner at night. Lower prescription drug prices. That's something that we all can stand behind, and everybody surely stood behind. The fact that the economy is absolutely raging. We have the lowest levels of unemployment amongst all demographics in our nation's history, and that's remarkable. And it's sad to see it a bit shadowed by some calls for socialism, which really socialism and the mention of socialism and the mention of the border security debate that we're in right now were really the two dividing factors. And it's important, I think, for those to realize that these are elected politicians who take an oath of affirmation to uphold the laws and the Constitution of the United States of America. Within that Constitution is our guarantee of liberty, our guarantee to be afraid of large government and to be protected from large government. So it was a bit disheartening to see some of our elected United States politicians sitting down when the President of the United States was espousing these great ideals of liberty and being able to choose what we want rather than the government getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which is what we see now.
Yeah, it certainly goes against exactly what the Constitution says. Let's talk about the government shutdown and where we stand right now, because as it is, you know, it looks like Congress has some sort of a bill that they're going to be putting in front of Congress, potentially going to the president. If the president doesn't sign off on that, what's going to happen next?
He'll have to sign the emergency order.
So you think he's going to declare an emergency?
I don't know if he's going to. Maybe the proposal is one that the Trump administration is expecting, and therefore the other side will present it to have some kind of acquiescence and some kind of agreement along the aisle there. I don't see that happening. What I believe happening is that we will see a proposal here with a much smaller or lower amount being dedicated towards border barriers or security. I think that will be insufficient for the Trump administration. I think Trump cannot let all the voters down and the citizens of our country who want a strong, secure border. One thing that's very interesting is after the first shutdown, there was a monumental impact. It was story number one across the world for all intents and purposes. The government is shutting down. And it was a shock therapy technique that I think was used incredibly well. Now, unfortunately, President Trump had to sort of stop that pain for the American citizens, but it was brought to the forefront for conflict based on politics. So many people were suffering, continue to suffer. There are bills still due, aren't there?
Yeah.
There's not a direct deposit or an ACH from the Department of Treasury to say, hey, Mr. Landlord, we're not shut down. Go ahead and you're taken care of, and wipe out those late fees. So it has become so front and center now. This has become the issue. February 15, February 15, February 15, what will happen? And I think because of that spotlight, it's very difficult for those who do not support funding for the wall to take that stance. There are people in very liberal jurisdictions around our fine country that are are knocking on the doors of their politicians saying, I'm with you. I agree that we all should have an opportunity. But on the other hand, I also cannot ignore the story of our neighbor who was victimized by an individual that should not have been here or taken drugs, fentanyl, that crossed the border when they shouldn't have crossed the border. And now we have dead young souls that could have blossomed into productive, beautiful human beings in our country.
Now, the president, you mentioned that emergency order. He says he doesn't want to bypass Congress, but it is his legal authority to do so if he declares that emergency. And then he also says, but he's afraid that legal action would be taken against him. Specifically, what would that legal action be if he's afforded that right in the Constitution?
You will look forward to a legislative, essentially a preliminary injunction. When we have an executive branch or a legislative branch or any political actor taking an action, there's always an opportunity for a preliminary injunction to be had. That is asking a court to stop that action from taking place because the damage to the person who's asking for the preliminary injunction, such as those concerned citizens who do not want a strong border, that damage would be permanent. It would be irreparable. So you can look forward to head on into the courts, the circuit courts, in regards to that issue. I think that's what Donald Trump is trying to avoid here. President Trump is trying to avoid having to be the legislator. I believe in the hearts and souls of many of our elected politicians. They want the strong border. They want funding for it. Frankly, if you sit down with many that I have over a cup of coffee, you'll be surprised at what you hear. But it's not the popular vote. And this is the real economics of politics that really fly in the face of progress for our society. And that is, what is popular? Where are we going to get the votes? What is social media listening to, and what are they reacting to? And therefore, I will dictate my platform.
Yeah, because this issue, this is not new. It's just been always termed as political suicide if you take up this issue. But, you know, it seems that the left, the Democrats in Congress, they aren't concerned with what's popular necessarily, but it seems if they give this president a win, which you know he's going to take into 2020, they don't care about anything other than stopping that win. Is that the litmus test that you're seeing as well?
Oh, absolutely. We've been on this program many times, I think, in the past year and a half, and we've talked about sound bites from senators that we predicted many, many months ago would make a run for the 2020 presidential campaign. And, of course, they've done that. They've announced their candidacy. Now, these sound bites that we see at these highly publicized congressional hearings, when you're involved in the hearings and you're following the hearings word for word, sentence by sentence, and question and answer, they are nonsensical sound bites. But when you extract that 20-second piece of information, boy, it sounds really great. And it allows, you know, that Spartacus moment, as they say, to come to the forefront. But if you look at it in a macro cosmic way rather than a microcosmic way, and that 1 second of that soundbite, these are destructive comments because they are legislators that are supposed to be conducting inquiries of citizens and lawmakers and people who have extraordinary power. And rather than going through that, what I have seen in our household is we watch almost every minute of those, and of course my wife may say that's not the best thing in the world, but it is, because this is an important part of our country's history. It is laughable, quite frankly, when you see the questions and answers being presented and the answers being responded to. So we would hope that the legislators would do what they're supposed to do. Don't look forward to the election. Don't try to be the popular person.
Exactly.
Try to protect the citizens of our fine community.
And listen to the Border Patrol and hear what the experts say about it. You know, this is what their recommendation is.
To the tune of about 95% of them say we need a wall, a fence, a wall, a barrier, whatever you want to call it.
That's correct. And to your point, to your excellent point, in any venue, and I have the privilege of walking into state and federal courts around our beautiful nation on a weekly basis. And as much as I may argue till I'm blue in the face about a certain point, you know what every astute judge tells me? Well, Mr. Bajaj, that sounds really nice, but I need to hear from the expert. So as politicians are, many times lawyers are representatives of their case or cause or family that they're representing. That can be given a minimal amount of weight. We have to always look at the experts. And if we ignore the expert testimony, then of course our opinion in the court of law is minimal and should not be relied upon. And the same thing, I believe, applies to politicians of today's world.
Yeah.
No, Vic
Excellent
Bajaj,
point.
It is
Excellent
always
point.
so good to have you in.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We didn't even get to what's going on in Virginia either. That could be very interesting.
You have an extra hour.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insight.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right.
Vic.